How do we keep an open mind without letting our brains fall out? I have a lot of inspirations online and in the world in general. There's a number of celebrity inspirations, Jack Black and Brennan Lee Mulligan and Bernie Burns and David Tennant and Ben Schwartz. And there's a word that ties them together that I sort of realized a few days ago. Whimsy. They're whimsical men. Which, as a descriptor for menness, word often associated with, like, I don't know, all the things you might associate a manly man with. Whimsy's a bloomin' good one. That's what I want to be. Whimsical. Because they're improvisers and actors and creatives and directors, and they're seeing the world through story, and they're open to possibilities. They're open to ideas. Being open to ideas, saying yes, and means you are more just generally like creative, receptive to other people and where they're at. You become genuinely interested in what's going on with other people, not just in a work setting. I'm not talking about just improvising for work. I am an actor and I'm also a YouTuber, and improv is something I'm interested in, of course. But going into life with this attitude of playfulness is maybe the biggest skill that I would like to spend the next chapter of my life nurturing. But there's this other side of myself, and it ties into the title. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist, and I have been since I've been able to assess the claims about religious belief. Not only am I not convinced that deity and the supernatural exists, but I am convinced that a more likely candidate explanation is the human love of storytelling. And I don't mean to belittle anything that anyone believes. It just so happens to be the case that, yeah, I'm not convinced. And I think we create these stories and have created these stories historically for many different reasons, not least because it's something to aspire to and it's exciting. Even as an atheist, I think we all agree that the supernatural is cool and interesting and exciting. Ideas about like other realms and other beings and transcending life. Like, yeah, these are all very natural human interests. It makes sense to me why religions exist and why deity stories come about. And I think part of being an atheist for me, what it has meant for me typically, is the ability to be like sturdy in my views, which sounds odd because I think a big part of my skepticism is that I try and keep an open mind, you know. But what happens when you've assessed a claim so very many times from so very many different angles? When you've spent the better part of 15 years listening to podcasts and discussions and having conversations, religious leaders. I get more videos now recommended on my YouTube from religious people than atheist people. What does it mean to keep an open mind and not let your brain fall out? What does it mean genuinely to keep an open mind? I don't know that I know what that means. Because yes, of course I could always be wrong. Of course I could always be wrong. 100% certainty isn't even a realm I'm dealing in, you know? But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that when somebody comes to me and says, hey, I believe in this, I have this religious belief, I have this faith, and I worship this God, or I practice in the teachings of my religion. I want the first thought from me to be, wow, that's interesting. What is life like for you looking at life through that lens? I want that for myself because I think that's where the best creatives live. And I think it makes you just like a more empathetic person. I think it makes you see the world with more vibrancy if you can step into those shoes just for a little bit. But what actually happens, if I'm being totally honest, when I hear that thing from people, is that's the second thought. The first thought, the reflex is, you're wrong. I wish I didn't have that reflex. I hope to wean that out of me in time. But at the same time, I am My atheism is, well, technically it is weak atheism because I'm not making an assertive claim. But it's not a weak position. It's one I've really given quite a bit of consideration for. I've come to this conclusion time and time again. I've had so many different discussions, historical ones, ethical value ones, philosophical ones. I've heard the discussions, and I'm just still not convinced that it's. I'm not convinced of the truth of it, and I'm not really convinced that it's necessarily the best way to live life. I think there might be other secular options. But even if, by the way, those secular options are developed from religious communities that have proliferated through time to where we are now, that have ultimately produced me. But my belief, of course, is that those religious stories were created by people first. Based on human ethics from the beginning. That's my belief, right? It's just a chicken egg game, I guess. What does it mean to have an open mind and not let your brain fall out? What does it mean to not just go, hey, I could be wrong, but to have an open mind where it's like, wow, I am excited to understand what that means for you? What do I do to train myself to feel that? Because that is a side of myself I want to nurture, but those two sides of myself feel like sides of myself. They feel separate and they feel in conflict. In my therapy this week, and this has kind of been an overarching theme of therapy, I was talking about this idea of someone who sees the tree leaves as orange when I know they're green. And I'd love to see the leaves as orange. I'd love to understand what it is to see the leaves as orange. But I know they're green. I know they are. I just think you're in the wrong. I think there's probably some demonstrable, provable way of saying that you're in the wrong. But ultimately, somebody sees it as orange, and it's important to them. And of course, a therapist's job is to, as she said, I just take people as they are. They come as they are, and if somebody feels, something, it's important to them, and that's the job of the therapist. I think in that way, the therapist and the actor have a lot in common. And, let's humble myself here. Like, even if I am right about the truthness of, in my disbelief, if it's a very healthy disbelief, which I think it is, of course, otherwise I wouldn't be saying it. So what? At the end of the day, I'm dealing with people. And when I say dealing with, I'm living with. I'm in this social space with other human beings, and I want to be able to engage with what's important to them. But then there's the other side of the coin, which is, but what happens when those beliefs are dangerous? What happens when those beliefs are it's not about religion, let's say, but it's just sexist or homophobic or transphobic? What if it's rooted in some other weird belief that somebody has? I say the word weird right away. Is it right to stay open-minded about people whose beliefs have impacts on other people? That could be religion. Very often has been throughout history. I mean, I'm not the policeman of people's actions, right? I guess. But then again, we sort of all are. We're all constantly kind of judging each other a little bit and holding each other accountable to be better, to look after one another. So yeah, I don't know. And maybe I don't know is always just the correct answer. I don't know. But then the leaves are green. How do we keep an open mind without letting our brain fall out? I don't have an answer for you. I'm hoping you've got an answer for me. Or I'm hoping at least you've got a book or a podcast or a recommendation or a movie that this inspires for you that you can recommend. Be respectful in the comments to each other. Try and keep an open mind. Try and live with some whimsy. That's what my next chapter of life is all about, I think. As I try and navigate this strange and complicated marrying of the two sides of myself, as I try to find balance between healthy, rooted positions in my own world that allow me to navigate, and creative possibility and empathy in the most extreme kind of sense, because I think that's important to me too. Two things that are important to me that feel in conflict. That's a hard one. That's a really hard one. I don't know.